Hello and welcome to this video on how to find a web application development company for your project. I am Lane Campbell. I'm the founder of Kevant, a web development agency specializing in custom web application development here in Orange County, California. And I wanted to put this video together to help anyone, whether you're a business owner, maybe you work at a company and you're trying to find a development company, even if you're a software development manager and you're looking to outsource a small project. Regardless of who you are, I think some of the tips that will be covered in this video would be helpful. Some of the things we're going to be covering is some of the ramifications of how bad a bad software company can be, and how to find an initial list of software companies, how to look up some of the reviews of software companies that may be on your list, some tips in terms of doing the initial phone screen, as well as some initial screening questions that are important. We're going to be talking about references on those companies and how to go through that process, that type of thing. And then we'll get down into shortlisting, and then we'll talk about some of the tricks that unfortunately are pretty prevalent in the software development industry, at least things that you should be made aware of. So to get started, I'll quickly do an intro of myself. I have about 20 years of experience in the software development industry. Almost all of that is in web development, and I've worked as an internal web developer, architect, and management at Fortune 500 companies. I've also worked as basically that same role at web agencies that have built websites for other companies and for other Fortune 500 companies. And I'm also the founder of Kevant, as I mentioned, so I've kind of got a perspective on both sides, both from looking for developers to help with projects, and being on the other side, which is being an agency and trying to win projects and that type of thing. So to get started, how bad can a bad software company be? Unfortunately, what happens pretty often is if a company selects the wrong company or developer to do their project, what can happen is ultimately it can delay the project by months. It can sometimes take weeks or even months before you really determine definitively that, hey, we got the wrong developer or we got the wrong company. They're not able to perform the tasks and build the system that we had originally envisioned. And what that means is that you're ultimately wasting time, money, obviously, and in some cases, unfortunately, you actually end up at a point where if you go with a totally separate company, that you're actually scrapping the work that first company's done. And unfortunately, like I said, this is something that happens quite a bit. So that's why a lot of the tips in this I would hope really help you prevent that experience for yourself. So the first question is, well, how do you create an initial list of potential companies? And the first thing you want to do is use your own network. If you can get someone that you trust that can actually recommend a company that they've worked with in the past that has done has executed a similar project for them, that's a great place to start. If you don't have that, then obviously Yelp is a great place, because that would allow you to find companies that are local to you that would potentially be able to execute your project. And lastly, if you don't particularly need the company to be local, you can go with sites like Elance, Freelance Guru, and Odesk, and those are all websites that would allow you to post a business requirements or functional specification document for your project, and then have multiple people bid on that. Kind of the differences between these two are mainly local versus non-local. If you're looking for the accountability of having someone local, and you're really more concerned about quality over the cost, usually having someone local is going to be a better way to go. If you're very sensitive to the overall cost, you're typically going to have lower cost options on Elance and those types of sites. So that's just kind of some general advice there. But once you do have your initial list, one of the first things that you want to look at before you even contact the company, in my opinion, would be to look at reviews on these particular companies. So, obviously, if you're using Yelp, there's going to be reviews. It's pretty common that you're not going to find a lot of reviews on software development companies, simply because some of them are very successful just with maybe a dozen clients, and so you may find that there just aren't going to be a lot of reviews, so that can be a little bit tricky. On Elance and some of these other sites, there's typically going to be a lot more reviews, but those individuals are typically going to be doing a lot of smaller project, so there may be some more reviews that would be there for you to kind of look into. In terms of the reviews themselves, regardless of what they are and where you're finding the reviews, I would say be careful that the scope of work of the reviews actually matches your requirements. You may find, hey, this great developer on Elance, he's got 30 reviews, etc. But if you actually dig into those reviews, you may find that some of the work is, maybe it's more design work than software development work, or maybe it's even some, let's say, copywriting work, or just very small jobs that are kind of outside the scope of what you're looking into. So you want to make sure that they match what you're actually looking to. And then the next thing is, are the reviews actually real? I wouldn't be too skeptical of the reviews on Elance and those types of sites, but if you're looking at reviews on Yelp and Google reviews, you really have to, unfortunately, ask yourself the question, or be aware that those reviews might not be real. And I would say, don't take my word for that. Actually do a Google search on, for example, companies caught buying reviews, that phrase, and you'll see that this problem is really prevalent. There's a lot of companies out there that buy reviews in order to get high ratings on sites like Yelp and Google and that type of thing. So just be cognizant of that as you go through this process. And the other thing is, are the reviews coming in from customers that are locked in, and so that they therefore kind of feel obligated to give a 5-star review? This is actually, I would say, a pretty prevalent issue on Elance, because a lot of times the person buying the services will do a review for each milestone. So let's say a project has 5 milestones, and they get to that first milestone, and they're going to be asked, once they release the milestone payment to the developer or development company, to give a review. So put yourself in that position. If you're just starting out on a project, and let's say that the company's they've done good, but they haven't done great, you're still going to kind of feel obligated to give them a 5-star, just because that, hey, you've still got, you're kind of in a relationship with this person or this company. That they're going to be building the rest of your site, and you don't want them to have any bad feelings that you gave them 4 stars instead of 5 stars. So just be cognizant of that as well. And as I mentioned before, look for reviews on Yelp and Google. Obviously those are probably the 2 major ones for if you're not using Elance or one of the others. And you can also check in LinkedIn as well to see if that company has any like a LinkedIn page and any followers, that type of thing. That's a good place to check, and that'll also give you some information on maybe the number of employees they have, and how legitimate the company is overall. That's a good thing to look into. Once you've done that, then you want to set up an initial phone screen. And when you talk to the person, make sure that you ask for the title and tenure of the salesperson. And the reason I say that is because if you're talking to someone who's an actual project manager that works with clients, and just happens to be the person taking the calls, that's actually a good thing, because that person is typically going to be able to give you quite a lot of detailed information, as opposed to a salesperson who may just be able to give you some high-level information about the company, but not necessarily get into the details. You want to kind of know who you're talking to, how long they've been at the company, before you ask some of these additional questions. One of the first things you want to do before you explain what your project is you want to ask the person to tell me a little bit about your company. So obviously you want to do that before you explain what your project is, in order to get an answer that's as real and unbiased as possible. And then you want to also ask, what type of software development does your company specialize in? And there are quite a number of different areas within web development, and obviously you get into search engine optimization and the whole marketing piece, all the way through website design and then website application development. Those 2 things are just, if you look at just website design and website development, are 2 drastically different things that take different types of software developers. One is more of a web designer. If you're looking for someone to build an external facing site that would be simple, just a website, for example. And if you're looking for an actual custom web application, then you're looking for developers. So that's something separate. And then there's also companies that specialize in mobile. There are larger companies that that are actually pretty good at this all, but it's pretty rare. Usually a company is going to be good in just one or two things. Maybe they're just good in marketing and website design, but they're not particularly going to be great for website development. So you want to really ask that question and get a sense of what the agency specializes in. And then at that point, you want to go ahead and explain your high-level requirements, and you want to see what the feedback that they give you based on this is. They should be able to volunteer ideas and examples of past similar projects. So they should be able to, after hearing you say, oh yeah, we've done a few of those projects. Here's a couple of examples, that type of thing. If they don't do that, then not necessarily a red flag, but you might want to be careful as you ask, kind of take the next steps and so forth. If that initial phone screen kind of seems to go okay, then you may want to ask some of these additional questions. The first one would be, what is your development process? Some of the common development processes would be Agile, SDLC, Waterfall. There's quite a few other ones. But what you're really asking here is, what's the internal development process, and do you have one? I mean, that's really the main question that you're trying to get. You want to make sure that there's some development process that the company follows internally. Even if you have no software development experience yourself, you want to at least get a decent answer to this, just to make sure that there's something that they actually follow. Another question that's really important would be, what frameworks and content management systems do you have any expertise in? There are certainly companies out there that really just do custom development work, and that's okay if your project needs that. But it's also really good to go with a company that does custom software development, and then also is capable of building custom applications on top of frameworks. And that a framework might be, for example, Drupal, it might be Joomla, it might be WordPress. But you really want a company that has that broad spectrum of experience, so that if your requirements would be in line with perhaps building it on top of an existing platform, that might make a lot of sense for you in terms of being able to bring your product to market quicker and cheaper than it would if you were doing a complete custom development. So that's just an important question to ask. And another question would be, how do you manage changes to the scope of work mid-development? And this means that, let's say you're halfway through the development project and something comes up where you decide that you need something else than what you'd originally communicated. How do they deal with that change? And the correct answer should be, well, we create a change order, and they can explain to you what the process is. But you want to ask that question because those things do come up. Especially as you start looking at the prototype and you start envisioning customers actually using the site. There's always going to be changes that you come up with, and you want to make sure that they have a process that's fair to you in terms of implementing those changes into the existing project. Next question would be, how do you manage the tasks of your developers? The wrong answer here, in my opinion, would be that we use an Excel spreadsheet. What you really want them to say is that, oh yeah, we use a tracking system. They should be able to give you the name of the tracking system and some of the benefits it provides. Next question is, how will we know where our project is at any given time, and can we log into a task management system and get an update, or do you provide weekly status updates? And what you're really looking for here is to make sure that they actually have some process in place where they communicate where your project is at any given time. And it really should be weekly, bi-weekly, worst case. And it should be at least a one-pager that they send you to say, hey, here's what we're working on, here's what we're working on next week, here's what we've accomplished this week, and so forth, so that you can make sure that the project is moving on at a steady pace. And you may be involved with the project on a daily basis depending on the situation, but if you're not, and you've kind of handed this project R, you want to make sure that there isn't too much time that goes by where you're not really sure what's going on, and a whole month goes by and it come to find out, well, they haven't really even started the project, or they haven't gotten quite as far as they had communicated to you that they would have, etc. Moving on, so company org structure. This one you just want to get a sense of. You may actually want a kind of a full agency experience where they have salespeople and they have account managers and they have project managers, project coordinators. developers, etc. You may actually want that depending on your situation, but you may also want a company that has a more flat and more lean structure. So you might have an owner at the very top, and then right under that you have project managers, and then the project managers work directly with developers. So that's going to be a leaner structure that should probably, in most cases, allow them to have lower rates, which leads us to the next question here, which is, what is your hourly rate? And you'd be surprised on the number of times you might not just get a straight answer to this, but you really want to push on what is your hourly rate. It may be that they have different rates for different types of work, but you should at least be able to ask them what their hourly rate is for software development. In other words, for a programmer working on your project, per the scope of your project, and they should be able to give you a number. Next question is number of employees. You just want to get a sense of how big the company is. And the next question after that is how many employees with the skills required for your project. So that may be a 20-person company, but if 15 of those are all in marketing and content writing and SEO and that type of thing, and they only have a handful of people that are actually web developers, and you want a web development project, that might kind of tell you, well, maybe this isn't a company that specializes in this. Maybe they specialize more in marketing, and that's not what we're looking for this particular project. But that's a good question to ask, just because it kind of gives you some hard numbers, and helps you determine what the company actually specializes in. Next question would be, what is your QA process, and what QA tools do you use? So QA being quality assurance. You want to make sure that they have some process in place so that by the time that they ask you to review your web application or your website, that someone has actually looked it over and making sure that it meets the specifications that you agreed on to. You can also ask them what unit testing tools, what functional testing, and what load testing they do. Those are all further indications of how much effort they put on the quality assurance process. And it's you can definitely ask for the tools that they use. That's a good indication of the fact that they're using a tool is better than doing everything manually. That's just kind of some insight into their internal operations that I think is important. The next question is, what are the escalation options if something goes wrong? So you want to get a sense here, okay, am I going to be working with a project manager every day, and what happens if I'm not really happy with that person? Maybe they're not responsive, maybe they're taking 2 days on average to get back to me, and if you get frustrated, what are your options in terms of escalating those issues upward? So that's an important question to ask. And then the last two, obviously you're going to have to take with a grain of salt, but what percentage of your customers would say that you exceeded their expectations? And then next, what percent of customers would you say had a bad experience with you? And in my experience, even great agencies are going to have projects that just don't go well, and it may be the fault of the agency, it may be the fault of the client, and typically it's a mix of both. It could be miscommunications, that type of thing. But any agency that tells you that 100% of their clients have been satisfied and they've never had any project go horribly bad is I would be a little skeptical of that, because it may be only 1 in 20 projects that goes bad, but they just do. It just happens. There's 100 different reasons why it can, and I would think that if a agency tells you, well, maybe 1 in 20, so that would be about 5% of our we've had some projects go bad. I think that's actually not bad, and at least there's some honesty there. But anyone that tells you that we've never had a project goes bad, I would be really wary of that. But at any rate, once you get past the initial screening questions, then you want to actually start to get some references. And the first thing that you do, in my opinion, would just be to ask for references. So don't ask for anything specific, or say we want a specific number of references, or we want a specific type. We don't need. Don't ask for references for a specific type of project they've done. Just ask for references, and then see what they come back with. Hopefully they'll come back with a list of several references, or maybe even more, which is a really good thing. And obviously the next thing you want to do is contact those references. But in addition to that, you always want to find clients from their website and contact those references, because obviously the references that are on their list are going to be projects that went very well, that they've talked to in advance and have kind of cleared them for as being references, that type of thing. But you can always go on their website most of the times, find a project that's similar to yours and that's not on the reference list, and just call up that company, try and find the person that dealt with the agency, and get a reference that way. That's a great way to do it, because then you're getting a more of an unbiased reference from someone that has actually used them, that type of thing. One of the main questions I ask of any references, whether I'm doing a reference for an individual candidate that I'm hiring, or in this case a development company, is just ask the person giving the reference to rate the company overall from 1 to 10. If they say 10, great. Then that they've been very happy, and that they've probably actually had their expectations exceeded. If it's anything less than a 10, then simply ask why, and that will kind of cut through all the different questions you can ask and kind of get to some of the opportunities for improvement that this agency may have. And you can look at your own situation and see if the issues that maybe some of these clients had with them would also be issues that you've had, and if those are things that you could live with, or if maybe this is not a company that you want to shortlist. And obviously, the two additional questions that you want to ask would be: was the project on time, and was it on budget? Did the project go smoothly, etc. And then once you've gone through that process, what you would do is start to shortlist these. So you typically want to narrow your list down to the top 2 or 3 companies, and ask some additional questions, which we'll go through now, which would be, what are your payment terms? So you want to know that, really at this point, you want to determine if they require an upfront deposit, if they have milestones, and if those milestones would be set up with payments. Some companies do kind of do a very simple, half up front, half when the project goes live. That may be kind of a little bit risky for you to do if this is the first time that you've worked with this company. But you want to ask it at this point. You want to find out what their payment terms are, and if there's any flexibility there as well. The next thing that is extremely important, and this is an issue that happens all the time, where a company will kind of hold the source code hostage on a company that's using their services. And so one of the ways that you want to prevent that is to ask, when do we get the source code? And the answer to that should be that you get it after each milestone. So let's say that you've got a project that's split up into 4 milestones. After you pay for the first milestone, you should get the source code and a copy of the database at that point, because you've paid for the code and the development up to that point. Make sure that you ask the company how they do this and how they handle it. And if they're sketchy about this at all, then you may want to be very careful, because if you've paid for 4 out of the 10 features that this company's building for you, and you've agreed that this is a milestone, they should have no issue whatsoever of releasing the source code to you in the database, because you've paid for it to that point. You also want to ask if they have a staging server, and this is important because you want to be able to see the work as it progresses. You also want to determine if they have their own hosting, or if they recommend one. It's good to just know that up front, because some companies may charge you a really high premium on hosting, and they may more or less insist that they host it themselves, etc. You want to just get a sense of that, before you move forward. You also want to ask how they license third-party components. So maybe your project needs a charting component, or it's going to have some PDF generation, etc. You want to determine how the licensing is set up. You want to make sure that the licensing is in your name if you're paying for it, and that way, if you had to transition this project to another company in the future, you still want to make sure that you actually own the licensing for these components. And then you also want to ask for how do you handle site up time and monitoring. So if a month after your project goes live and something happens in the back end, your site goes down, are you going to be alerted to that by a customer who's very upset, or do they have some type of monitoring in place where you will get an email and they'll get an email, text messages, etc., if your site goes down for any period of time? You just want to ask that question, and they should have something in place. If they don't, that's kind of a little bit of a yellow flag, I would say. Okay, and then the last section that I wanted to cover is the tricks that some agencies play in order to win your business. And some of these are pretty shady. Unfortunately, they're pretty common. You just want to be aware of them as you move forward in terms of your process of selecting a vendor. The first one is that they'll tell you that they can start right away, and that might be very true, but it's also very possible that their team is already booked on other projects, and they're telling you that just to basically get you to sign on the dotted line. You want to be careful of that, and it's kind of hard for you to know whether that's true or not. But the only thing that you can do is to set up a very kind of low-hanging fruit, quick type of milestone that would be maybe 2 weeks after you sign the contract. To know that there's actually some progress, there's actually someone putting some effort in the project, that type of thing. The other type of thing that companies often do that is related to the first one is they do resource splitting, which means instead of having a developer dedicated to your project from start to finish, they will have a developer spend half their day on your project and half the day on another project, and so that allows them to move 2 projects forward, but the ramification for you is that you're going to get slower progress than you would if you had a full-time developer, or even 2 or 3 etc. developers working on your project. And so you want to ask them, hey, how many people are going to be working on my project? What can I expect in terms of a pace? How many hours per week and per month are going to be dedicated to my project, that type of thing. The reason that companies do this is because they can take on more projects, and keep their developers, build, have the highest utilization rates, that type of thing. So they do that for themselves, but it really doesn't benefit you at all. The other thing that happens very commonly is that they'll outsource your project to India or China, etc., and there'll be very minimal oversight in QA. So you're basically, they've basically almost taken themselves out as a middleman, and there'll be a team in India that's doing the work, but they're just going to be passing that back to you. So they're saying, okay, well, we've completed milestone 1. So you're going to go in to your staging server, look at the work, and you're going to determine, well, gee, this thing is full of bugs. It doesn't meet these 3 requirements. There's a lot of problems. So what you'll find, unfortunately, is that there's been no quality assurance of the site itself, and so you end up basically, as the customer in the role of quality assurance, which is just completely unacceptable, and unfortunately happens quite a bit. So be very careful of that. Another thing that they'll do is create a false sense of urgency just to try and get you to sign. So they'll say things like, we can start right away, but hey, we've got a couple other projects that are really close, and we want to make sure that we get yours in before this so that we can start yours, that type of thing. That happens in sales, all over the place, and you just want to be careful that you take the time to find an agency that you're really comfortable with and that you think is going to be the best for you, not just for the project, but strategically, not just once the project goes live, but maintenance and et cetera as well. Another thing, and this is one of the worst things that companies do, but I've heard a lot of our potential clients complaining about this, and this has just happened for years and years. It's very prevalent, but companies will underbid your project, basically as it's called a loss leader in the industry. And what they do is, let's say that your project, if they were to bid it fairly as a $20,000 project, they'll bid it at $8,000 or $10,000, whatever, at some significantly reduced amount. And then what they'll do is, maybe a third of the way or half, 2/3 of the way through the project, they'll come to you and say, hey, we underbid your project, yada yada, we're going to need another $5,000, another $8,000, whatever. And they know that you're kind of in a situation where you're kind of stuck, because your only option would be to dump them as an agency, go with another one, and have another agency pick up the work. But companies that usually do this will also be holding your source code for hostage, which is one of the the previous things I talked about. So Be extremely careful of this. This, really goes back to, check the references, make sure that they give you the source code, all that type of thing, etc. The next one, which is unfortunately very common as well, is kind of the bait and switch, where your project is going to start with the A team. They've actually got really great, their best developers and project manager working on it, and then at some point during the progression of your project, they kind of swap out those great developers with more junior ones. And what happens is you notice a decline both in the quality and then quantity of work that's being put out. And so what they've done is they've basically taken those other developers that are really great, and they've put them on perhaps projects that are more beneficial to the agency than yours is. And unfortunately that happens, and then you kind of become just one of the many projects this company's doing on. There's not a lot of focus and not a lot of concern on yours, and it's very sad, but this happens quite a bit. The other thing is that once they've started working on your project, many companies will kind of portray that they're experts in everything. So you're building this web application, but they're also experts in search engine optimization and marketing and hosting, and we do mobile too, and we can do web promotions and social. We can do Facebook and LinkedIn and etc. And you have to be careful about this, and it goes to some of the things I've talked about previously. You want to make sure that, for example, if you want a company that's going to be great at search engine optimization, as an example, you really want a company that specializes in that, SEO and marketing. You don't really want a company that specializes in web application development doing your SEO, because that's not really their forte. That's not everything that's not what they do all day. It's not their passion, etc. So you want to be cognizant of those things as well, and always go with an agency that specializes in what you're looking for, and don't be afraid to have multiple agencies. It's obviously very tempting to just say, I've got this company, they're doing a good job on my web application. Yeah, I'll use them for my front-end website and SEO, etc. But you may be doing yourself a real disservice there, because you're not getting a company that has top people working in those additional fields. So at any rate, I hope this has been helpful. Thanks for watching. Again, this is Lane Campbell, the founder of Kevant Technologies, and thanks for watching.